marked day 14 in R. Kelly's racketeering and sex trafficking trial. The prosecution is expected to rest its case as early as Monday, clearing the way for R. Kelly's defense team to try and do some damage control. But today, outside of the federal courtroom in Brooklyn, Kelly had another staunch supporter. BNC's Dre Clark got an exclusive interview with R. Kelly's brother.
R. Kelly hasn't received a lot of support here at his federal trial in New York. There are limited people allowed inside to watch the trial, and outside it's been relatively quiet. But this week, among those who are here to support him is his younger brother, Carey. They haven't always seen eye to eye, but now things have changed.
I've been hearing a lot of different things, and I want to come see for myself.
Carey Kelly, singer R. Kelly's younger brother, is hard to miss outside federal court in Brooklyn. The t-shirt he's wearing and the banner he's carrying makes it clear he's here in full support of his brother. R. Kelly is on trial for sex trafficking and racketeering charges. If he's convicted, he could receive 10 years to life in prison. Prosecutors maintain R. Kelly is a sexual deviant who for decades sexually abused underage girls using money and mind manipulation. Throughout his trial, so far, multiple accusers, some of them underage when they started having sex with R. Kelly, testified he was controlling and abusive, slapping, spanking, and humiliating them when he was angry. And they say he had a team of people who helped him carry out his alleged crimes.
I got a chance to see the lies that these people told in the court of law under oath. It changed the whole game, for me.
It's an about-face for Carey. 2 years ago, Carey, in multiple interviews, said his brother had a problem, and he noticed troubling behavior between his brother and what looked like underage girls. He was even quoted as saying he felt bad he did not speak up earlier after allegations against his brother started surfacing. But now Carey says he regrets saying anything negative about his brother, and the past doesn't matter because now he's standing by his brother because very few others will. Simply put, he says his brother's accusers are liars.
They lying. They are lying on him in the court of law. Everybody see it. That's there. That's part of it. You see it.
So far, more than 30 people, including accusers, have testified either directly against R. Kelly or provided testimony supporting the prosecution's claim that R. Kelly sexually abused underage girls. Kelly's defense team has tried discrediting his accusers, pointing out they lied to Kelly about their age. They took money from him, enjoyed lavish gifts and trips, and then became disgruntled when Kelly ended the relationship. The jury will ultimately decide how the case concludes. Meanwhile, Carey Kelly can't see his brother in person because of COVID restrictions. It means he has to watch the trial on a monitor in a separate courtroom. But he says his brother knows he has support. In New York, I'm Dre Clark for Making the Case.
Defending Kelly is a tall order after weeks of graphic and corroborating accounts of his alleged sexual and emotional abuse. Back with me with his nightly breakdowns is, of course, a veteran prosecutor and BNC's legal contributor, Paul Henderson. All right, Paul, your reaction to this about face from R. Kelly's brother. He previously said Kelly had a problem, but now says he believes all of these accusers are lying.
Well, I'm sympathetic to family members for folks that are in the situation where they're being prosecuted, but that doesn't really change my perspective or analysis of the testimony, which is evidence that's coming in on this case. I certainly understand that his brother does not want him prosecuted. What I think is interesting is his allegations or his claims about the folks that are testifying lying about what they're saying. And I think that's an opportunity for us to kind of unpack some of the folks that are still supportive and are being supportive about R. Kelly and look at it against the testimony that's coming in against R. Kelly. I presume that your Twitter and Instagram, like mine, is flooded with folks that are supportive of R. Kelly against the evidence that's coming in. And I think this is a great opportunity for us to really look at the information that we're learning from this testimony, which is evidence that we're seeing in the courtroom. So in addition to the testimony that came in today, we're hearing from a lot of folks that are challenging the testimony that are coming in from the myriad of folks. Remember, it's over a dozen men and women The allegation is that they are just fans, and we can just call them groupie or engaged in groupie behavior, that they've lied about their age, that they accepted money, that they took trips, that they were consensually engaged in activities with R. Kelly. And let's just be clear, at this point, it could not be more obvious to all of us that he was a BOF, big old freak, and just a celebrity. But the real issue is the line that gets crossed about criminal behavior. So whatever judgment you have about groupie behavior or fan behavior or consensual behavior, the real focus should be on criminal behavior by R. Kelly, the racketeering allegations of sexual exploitation, of kidnapping, of transportation of a minor, of statutory rape. And that's a real thing that we have to focus on and talk about. All of these people are talking about issues, and remember, rape requires force or fear to be proven. We're talking about statutory rape, and the distinction between rape and statutory rape is consent. With statutory rape, there is consent. The law says when you are under a certain age, you cannot give consent. It's as if you allow someone to shoot you and say, no, it's okay. It's still illegal. That's what statutory rape is. So if you have consensual sex with someone underage, that is illegal. That's the point. And so all of the lies, all of the accepting money, all of the trips, all of the delayed testimony, none of that matters if there was consensual sexual interactions with people that were underage. That is what's really significant and what stands out to me when I'm listening to people that are critical of the prosecution and don't want R. Kelly prosecuted. I understand he's a musical genius and a celebrity, but the evidence and the testimony that's coming in is making him look guilty to me. I'm curious to hear and see what the rest of the testimony and the defense will be in the case.
All right, now to what happened in court today, Paul. The jury heard from an expert witness, a doctor from NYU, who talked about sexually transmitted diseases, specifically herpes. Several of the accusers say R. Kelly gave it to him, but why is hearing from this doctor so significant, and why does she describe the STD so objectively?
Yeah, well, so for two reasons. One, specifically, so let's talk about why the doctor wasn't talking about R. Kelly and having his medical records, right? There's still HIPAA restrictions in terms of his medical background, in terms of what can be admitted in a court and talked about publicly. So the doctor was very clearly outlining and explaining how herpes works and what happens with herpes and what the symptoms and all that stuff are, because that speaks to the consensual nature of the sexual interaction that over a dozen people have talked about with R. Kelly, in articulating and making it probably more likely than not for this jury to hear and see. This is not the kind of things that people would have consented to, especially if we're listening to and believing the testimony. We're talking about a lot of people where this was their first sexual experience, was with R. Kelly, and they came away from that sexual experience with R. Kelly for the first time and with no one else with this disease, as an indication that R. Kelly was guilty of giving them this herpes, but more importantly, that he was the one that had a sexual experience with them that transmitted herpes. That's why they had to explain it in the way that they explained it. And it also speaks to the consent, even if you thought that maybe these folks are all groupies and are all liars, were they consenting to this exposure from herpes as well? That's why the prosecution wants to put this information out there and explain how herpes works so the jury can hear and understand and chip away at the arguments that defense is likely to argue later on about consent for the parties involved with R. Kelly.
All right, the last person we heard from today was one of Kelly's former employees who booked plane tickets for some of the women who traveled with Kelly. Could this witness and others like her face criminal liability for booking travel for underage minors in order to engage in illegal sexual activity?
Well, not in this case, and presumably they've gotten waivers, they've been indemnified or cleared of liability in order for their testimony for this federal trial. But that's only in the federal trial jurisdiction. The real danger is all of these people that helped, that booked tickets, that managed the girls, right? And they were locked in separate rooms, if we're believing the testimony, for long periods of time, and they were always rotating in and out. The issue is if they knew or should have known, exposes them to some liability. if they knew who was in those locked rooms, if they knew that young girls were being exposed sexually, did any of them see any of the taped sex play that all of the witnesses and all of the victims are saying took place, then they did know or should have known. And that liability may be exposed in some of the subsequent cases that are still pending against R. Kelly at the state level for sexual assault and sex with minor cases, and there's still at least 2 of those cases pending. And then the big looming threat for all of them are the civil charges that could come out of this testimony against everyone that's involved with R. Kelly, and that's the real risk here. But obviously the testimony is coming in the way that it's coming in, and it's corroborative with the stories that we're hearing from the victims talking about they weren't of age. They couldn't afford their tickets. Someone was coordinating them to and from airports, buying them tickets, sending them to vacations, putting them in these locked rooms and feeding them. And those people are liable, but that speaks to the racketeering charges that are targeted with R. Kelly specifically.
Paul, at some point next week, we expect to see the defense begin its case in chief. We've seen a preview of their strategy on cross-examination, but do you think the defense will put up any witnesses? We've seen how many witnesses the state put up, right? I mean, will the defense put on many, if any, at all?
I think they have to put on some just to put on a credible defense. If it were me, I would put on entertainment experts or psychologists to talk about groupies, how much they're willing to do to show that these were really willing participants. But as I explained earlier, their willingness is a red herring. That means it's a distraction to the jury. The real ultimate issue that prosecutors are going to try and get the audience and the jury to focus on is the criminal behavior of R. Kelly, and not be distracted by folks having memories where they don't remember all of the things that happened decades ago, where they accepted money, that they took trips, that they wanted to get close to R. Kelly or meet him or want something from him or took something from him. The real issue is R. Kelly's behavior. But if I were a part of the defense team, that's really the only direction that they can go in order to try and make a credible defense or argument.
Well, I'm curious about what an entertainment expert is, but we're definitely going to be looking forward to seeing what they put up next week. All right, veteran prosecutor and legal contributor Paul Henderson, thank you so much. Just 15 years old when he was wrongly convicted of rape and assault and sentenced to 5 to 10 years in prison, to now running for public office. The remarkable life story of Yusef Salaam, next on Making the Case.